Good morning, guys. Welcome to my unboxing and review of the high-grade Leo N. This is a 2025 premium Bandai exclusive release that I got for $29, which is, I think it's a little bit expensive for what you get in this box, but this is one of the three special side story Leos, alongside the Leo S and the Leo R. So this is an entirely melee-focused specialized Leo. It's very similar to the Leo R, but where the Leo R specializes in agility and elegance, the Leo N is pure brute force. As you can see from the proportions on this kit, it is incredibly bulky, taking the arms and I think the legs, I'm not exactly sure, from the Tragos, which is essentially the After Colony version of if a Dom and a gun tank had a baby. It is a heavy ground unit, and the Leo N is pure brute force, with its main weapon being a gigantic axe, not pictured here. Here it's just using a normal beam saber, dueling with, I think this is the Geminas Unit 1. I'm not that familiar with the actual Gundams from the Wing side story, but judging from the 0-1 down here on the shield, I assume this is the Geminas Unit 1. But anyway, this is the first of the three side story Leos that I plan to take a look at. I'm going to be taking a look at the Leo S next week, or maybe a little bit later, depends on how much time I spend playing Super Robot Wars Y, which comes out next week as well. And then I will be taking a look at the Leo R at some point in the future. I'm not the biggest fan of the Leo R, so it may take a few weeks for me to end up taking a look at that, but I'll probably end up looking at it in September, so make sure to sub the notification bell if you don't want to miss those videos. But anyway, getting into the box art here, here is the Leo N dueling the Geminas Unit 1 in a very standard release style box art here, very painting style, with the Leo N being shown very metallic and shiny across all of the, I think gold accents all across the unit, especially these giant shoulders here. But I don't know how much of this is actually going to be reused from the standard Leo, the flight type of which I took a look at last week. But I am a little bit wary because particularly in the legs here, the connection from the hip to the leg was very loose on that kit. So I am worried with the larger, heavier legs of this kit that it may end up posing an issue, but we will see. So this actually does end up feeling very standard release-like with all this information on the bottom of the box. Of course, you will get the full painted build of the Leo N here, holding its signature weapon, the Warrior Axe, this gigantic weapon emphasizing its brute force and power. Of course, talking about its articulation gimmicks with a shoulder swing there, showing some articulation here with, I don't know exactly what's happening here, like a Dragon Ball Z pose, maybe a flying knee, I don't know. And of course, talking about the Warrior Axe and storing the beam sabers in the shoulders. And then talking about how the chest and head utilize custom parts to show that it is a custom Leo. Presumably the custom parts in the chest are going to be these extensions coming on the side of the standard Leo chest there. And then on the back here, we get some information on the development of the Leo N, talking about how it's piloted by Bloom Brox of the Stardust Knights for part of an Oz special forces team. But of course, the Leo N appears to be the brute force muscle of the team. So inside the box, we will get 4 bags of runners, which again doesn't seem like a lot for the price you're paying for this thing, but again, maybe it makes up for it in bulk and size. But of course, we will also be getting this standard style manual here for the Leo N, talking about how it is actually rather tall for a mobile suit, especially in the After Colony era, where especially the Gundams tend to be a little bit smaller than they are in other universes, but I assume that extra height is from the large head axe it has there. And of course, a lot of the stats are unknown for this thing. And then of course for its weapons, it's going to be essentially entirely melee focused with some beam sabers, the head axe, the warrior axe, the shoulder shields, and its only ranged weapons being a couple of Vulcan guns. On the back here, a lot of the information that we saw on the box, including the same blurb on the development of the Leo N, and some information on its armaments, like the shoulder shields and the warrior axe, as well as the Vulcans. And then we get some information here on the Stardust Knights with the 3 side story Leos, and our color guide here, which looks like it's going to be very simple in terms of colors, only consisting of 4 colors: a yellow-green, a dark gray, a red, and a gold. The gold I'm probably going to end up repainting using EX yellow gold or something, because I already saw it through the bags, but this is going to be using a kind of gross injection gold that I don't really like. On the inside here, you will of course be getting your parts list, and yeah, this is going to be, as you might expect, this is going to be reusing some parts from the base Leo, but honestly, not that much. As you can see here from runners A and B, the vast majority of it is not going to end up being used in this kit. From runner A, it looks like the only parts we're going to be using are the upper thighs and the lower arms, and then in runner B, I'm not even sure exactly what we're going to be using from there. I think just some joint parts for the elbows and knees. And then of course we get the rest all appearing to be new runners, I believe, which may end up justifying the price if the vast majority of this kit ends up being new parts. But of course we will get into our build here with our rather wide chest unit here, of course borrowing parts from the Tragos. So yeah, this looks like it's going to be much more involved than the base Leo, which was incredibly simple. It was like 5 or 6 parts, not counting joint parts, but this looks like it's going to be far more involved with a lot more layering and things like that, so I'm expecting it to be quite nice. Unfortunately, it looks like the connection going from the upper torso into the middle torso into the waist is going to be using the same double polycap ball joint setup, which was very loose on the base Leo. And we get into our head here, which is about as simple as the base Leo. And then we get to our arms, which also look to be quite simple, but the actual scale of some of the parts, namely the shoulders, do seem to be much larger than the base Leo. Then of course you assemble your upper body, and then you get into your legs, which appear to be mostly reworked. What I am interested in is going to be the connection from the legs into the upper thigh, and it does look like it is going to be reworked, which I'm happy with. As you can see here, the connection going from the waist into the upper thigh is actually connected via PS plastic on plastic joints rather than a polycap ball, which was very loose on the base Leo, which I am happy with. And then you get into your other leg, and then your waist, which is more involved than the base Leo, with the skirt armor being significantly revamped over the standard Leo. Then of course you assemble, and then you build your weapon, which looks like it's going to be very simple, but it's just a big axe, so I don't know if anyone was expecting it to be super involved, but of course it's not. And what looks like it's going to be very nice is that all of the accent parts are part separated, which should make it very easy to paint if you want to redo the gross injection gold like I do. Inside the bags we will get 10 runners, which is a bit more than I was expecting for a high grade like this, especially a simpler one with a entirely melee arsenal, but it does look like there's going to be a ton of really nice color separation all across this kit. Unlike the standard Leo, we will also be getting this color correcting sticker sheet consisting of 2 stickers, one chrome reflective rectangle here, and then one red rectangle, presumably for the head maybe? Actually, no, I see a color separated part for the head there, which is presumably what the reflective silver part is for. I don't know what this red square is for then. But as for the runners themselves, so these runners were printed in June of 2025, starting of course with runner PC7 for a set of polycap ball joints, which we did see with the standard Leo. They did pose a little bit of an issue on that kit being fairly loose in a number of parts, but here I'm pretty sure I only saw it used in the torso for the torso articulation, so that should be the only part affected by these polycaps in this kit. So of course, starting with runners from 2018's standard Leo, we will be getting runner A here in a pale yellow-green color, going to contain the vast majority of the armor parts for the standard Leo, most of which we are not going to be using in this kit. As you saw from the manual, pretty much the only parts we're going to be using are going to be the lower parts from the elbow down for the arms, the upper parts from the knees up for the legs. Runner B, still from the standard Leo in this primer frame gray, going to contain a number of joint parts, most of which, again, we are not going to be using. I'm pretty sure we're only going to be using the parts for the holding hands, the knee joint. Runners C1 and C2, brand new for the Leo N, going to be a multicolor runner, coming in 4 different colors for C1 and 2 different colors for C2. We will be getting the same shade of pale yellow-green seen on runner A for parts for things like the legs and feet. We will be getting a injection gold here, which I'm not the biggest fan of, so I'm going to be repainting, but if you don't mind the color, then more power to you. But this is going to be parts for things like the accents on the feet, parts for our shoulders there, parts for the head axe, accent parts for the warrior axe, parts for the skirts, some vent details, etc. We will be getting 2 red accent parts here for, I believe, the tops of the sides of the, I don't know what to call it, near the collarbone. There were these 2 raised vent detail things that are actually color separated on the runner, which is quite nice, and then a clear red part here for the large mono eye sensor. Runner D1 in the same pale yellow green as runner A. Okay, so we are not going to be using the torso part from the standard Leo. There is a new part from this kit, but this is going to contain the rest of our pale green armor parts for things like the torso there, with the lower torso, middle torso, upper torso, parts for the sides of the torso, etc. And we will also be getting parts for our head down here. Runner D2 in a primer frame gray, going to contain a few parts for things like the inner frame of the torso, I believe the inner frame part for the waist. We'll be getting the backs of the hands there, the bottom of the head, and then 4 parts for the warrior axe. We'll be getting 2 runner E in a primer frame gray for the rest of our frame and joint parts, including parts for our shoulders there, some thruster details, our beam sabers. Okay, so these are our elbow joints there, not on runner B, my bad. Some extra thrusters here, I think for the back skirts, etc. And last but of course certainly not least, the same thing as was included with the base Leo, runner SB6 for a pair of short style beam saber effect parts in clear pink. So Yeah, actually a surprising amount of like part separation and color separation and things like that for all across this kit, really trying to justify its price tag, which is even higher now. I think it's getting another print in September, I believe. I don't know if that's unsold stock from the original August release date or if it's a second batch, but it is jacked up a bit because of the ongoing like p-bandai price hikes due to a number of different reasons, including like tariff uncertainty and their already announced price hikes of about like 15% for a number of kits for this year, but it's a little bit unfortunate. But I will see you after the build. All right, welcome back. Here is the high-grade Leo N, snap-built, panel-lined, and lightly painted. I repainted over all of the gold parts with an EX yellow gold Gundam marker, which I think turned out all right for some of the parts. For the shoulders, it's very splotchy, and the brush marks are very apparent on them. I think that's just what happens when you use a metallic Gundam marker on larger parts like this. I should really get around to picking up some of the disc-based soft tip markers at some point. I've heard those are very good, if a little bit fragile in terms of their final coat of paint. But getting right into the build, the Leo N is more complex than the Leo, but it is, at the end of the day, still based on the Leo. This is a very simple high-grade build, with the torso being the most, I guess, involved part, but the torso is pretty much the only part that matches the typical complexity of like a modern high-grade. The rest of this kit, being based on the Leo, is still very simple. The overall construction is very streamlined. Everything is still only like a few hollow parts sandwiched together with some joint parts in between. There is increased part separation in things like the torso and the legs in particular to give this kit very nice color accuracy and that extra little bit of part layering and things like that, with some joints pulling double duty as detail parts from the inner frame poking through. It does help to make the build feel a little bit more premium than the base grunt suit that was the Leo build. And at the end of the day, I think the increased amount of PS plastic on plastic joints within this kit also helps it feel a lot more stable and a lot more sturdy than the Leo, which I had a number of problems with feeling loose in multiple points caused by the polycap ball joints. In particular, the joints on this kit in the upper thigh going into the hip has been reworked to be a complete PS plastic on plastic joint, which makes the rather large and heavy legs of this kit way less of an issue than it would be if they kept the old polycap joint design. Now, the legs are still quite heavy, and in the knees in particular do tend to flop a little bit, but this kit is still very stable in the kinds of poses you would want it to be in, because unfortunately it's a little bit one note, but we'll talk about that later. As far as the build goes, it is fairly competent. It is a fun build, but it is also very fast. You can definitely get this done if you have like a spare couple hours one afternoon. So if you want to hold on to this kit for when you're a little bit more pressed for time to build Gunpla, then that is also a decent option, because you can assemble this kit very quickly. I think, not including the time it took to repaint over the gold parts, it took me like maybe an hour and a half to fully assemble and panel line this thing. It is a very quick kit to cut out, clean up, and build. But that's not to diminish the experience of the build at all. Like I said, it is competent and you'll have fun building this kit, but it's not going to do anything to blow your mind. So getting into aesthetics then, and this is the main reason you would want to pick this kit up in my opinion, unless you are like very much a fan of the wing, like I forget exactly what it's called, the wing side story, like the G unit or whatever. But of course, before I talk about my opinions on this design, let's talk about color accuracy, which is the part of this kit I was most impressed by. So getting into the very tiny sticker sheet, which is a bit of a downgrade from the Leo, which had no color correcting stickers, this really only has one, because sticker 1 is a reflective foil sticker that goes behind the visor there, which isn't necessary color correction, but it's just something that's just going to save you a couple seconds of extra hassle, because a lot of people, including myself, do use a little bit of chrome paint behind the visor to really help it pop, and that sticker accomplishes that job for us, so that looks quite nice. I won't really count that as a colored accuracy at all. Sticker 2 is going to be this wraparound part for this gray bar in the middle of the torso, which on the Leo flight type I noted was supposed to be in a dark gray. On that kit, it's just a light gray, it's just one piece. Here, they include a red wraparound sticker to make it color accurate. Apart from that, no color correcting stickers, and the rest of this kit is entirely color accurate. The amount of part separation and color separation is really impressive for the few amount of parts on this kit, although the actual color scheme of the Leo N is quite simple, so at the end of the day, I don't know how much that offsets how impressive it is that this is basically a fully color accurate kit out of the box with the one red color correcting sticker going around the bar. Now, you may want to repaint the gold parts on this kit. I used EX yellow gold, which I think looks nice on this kit and contrasts very nicely. I do plan to use 3 different tones of gold for each of the 3 Stardust Knights, so this kit's going to be using yellow gold, and it looks good on most of the parts, except for, again, the shoulders where the brush marks are very apparent. It's very splotchy. That's one part where I do wish I had more time so I could take the time to like fully hand paint it with brushes and everything, but as it is now, I think it looks all right, and it definitely looks impressive with the metallic sheen on all of the gold parts once you repaint it, so that is something I do recommend, especially if you do not like the injection gold color like I do. I'm really not a fan of it. And in terms of my opinions on this design, it is a little bit odd to me. This is very much a one-note kit with its very large, brutish proportions, really lending itself only towards one kind of, like, I guess, aesthetic in terms of posing and things like that, where you want to emphasize the heft of its large warrior axe. I don't think it looks that great with the beam sabers, but you can pose it with it, of course, if you like them. And I do think some of the proportions on this kit are a bit comical, notably the arms, with how large and oversized the shoulders are. Having just normal Leo arms underneath it looks very odd to me. While the legs, I feel like, are significantly less mismatched, even though both the arms and the legs come from the same source, the Tragos, I believe. So having this like very thick upper arm immediately taper down into the normal Leo lower arm and hand does feel a little bit awkward to me, but I think the barrel chest of this thing, the large shoulders, and the large lower legs all combine together to make this very almost gorilla-like, very big, brutish mobile suit. And I do think it is a bit unique in that aspect, where you have a very large, heavy-hitting melee unit, where many of the melee units in Gunpla do tend to be more, I guess, nimble, even if they are wielding comically large weapons, like the Astray Red Frame Kai with the tactical arms, but this kit really has the mobile suit match with the heft of its weapon, which you'll see in a moment. So for a quick size and visual comparison, here is the high-grade Leo Ent next to a standard-sized Tiger. I made the high-grade Blue Destiny Unit 1, and a more or less standard Leo, the Leo Flight Unit equipped type, which is essentially just a base Leo with a flight pack bolted onto it, so I'm using that as the baseline Leo to compare these special side story Leos to. So as you can see, the Leo N is going to be taller than your standard 1/144th scale high grade, even without including the head axe there as part of its height. So the Tragos legs in particular, the lower legs, do give it extra height compared to the normal Leo and compared to a normal high grade. So this will take up more space on your shelf than a typical high grade, especially when it's wielding the warrior axe. Now for a quick visual comparison with the normal Leo, you can really see what I was talking about with the goofier proportions. So as you can see, the Leo's forearm is of course identical to the Leo N's, just being in a different color. And on the Leo, it makes sense because it's proportioned properly with the rest of the arm and the shoulder. With the Leo N, it looks very comical with this huge oversized shoulder. You can also see what I was talking about with the more brutish gorilla-like proportions of the Leo N, being a very top-heavy kit despite its longer legs, with the giant shoulders and the barrel chest being about double the width of the normal Leo's chest. And I think the extra accents next to the head provided by the little red ventilation details up there, as well as the head axe, really do help this kit stand out compared to a typical Leo. But this also does actually look like a customized grunt suit at the end of the day, so that is also part of this kit's appeal. So for your accessories, here's the Leo N with everything it comes with, and you can really see what I was talking about with this kit being one note. So of course, starting as usual with your hand options, this is very similar to the base Leo, going to only come with one pair of hands, being your standard high grade holding hands there. In terms of your, I guess, secondary melee weapon, you will get two beam sabers, going to be stored in the shoulders here when not in use. As you can see, it is kind of a little bit difficult to get to, so let me get a pair of tweezers. So yeah, once you get the beam saber out of there, it is a pretty standard beam saber, but it is slightly different from the Leo's beam saber. If you remember from my video on the Leo flight type, those kits use essentially an identical beam saber to the Tall Geese, which has a square body to mount it properly into the back of the shield. With no shield, the Leo N here is free to use a standard rounded beam saber here. So besides that, not really much to say. It's a pretty typical beam saber. And of course, to use with the beam sabers, one on each shoulder, you will get a pair of short style beam saber effect parts here, the exact same as the Leo. Not much to say, they do the job fine. And of course, for the Leo N's main weapon, you get the warrior axe here, which is a really large, impressive weapon, as you can see, standing taller than the Leo N itself and being about the same height as a typical master grade. So this is a very large, impressive weapon that's going to give the Leo a lot of its presence on the shelf and make it look really impressive. And this weapon also looks quite nice, especially after you repaint the gold parts. With these small accents, the brush marks, if you just decide to use a Gundam marker, are very much not apparent, and it just looks really, really nice. With this excellent part separation here, there's also some surface detail in the axe, as you can see. So if you want to help the axe really stand out, you can paint the cutting edge in silver or something, and that will also make this look quite impressive. This is what you're going to be seeing the Leo N using in the bulk of the poses in the posing section. So yeah, that's it. That's all of the accessories that comes with the Leo N. This is an incredibly bare bones kit, and if you're getting this kit, it's going to be for the large, brutish proportions of the Leo itself combined with the warrior axe. When you consider that, there's not really much else you would want this kit to have. I think in universe it doesn't even use any ranged options besides the two Vulcans built into the sides of its chest. But getting into articulation now, starting with the head, identically to the base Leo, despite the head going on a ball joint, the head itself has very little articulation, which is actually more than the base Leo had. The base Leo had literally zero articulation. For the Leo N, the most you can do is a minuscule upward look. I don't know how well that even comes across on camera. It is very tiny. And a very minor downward look. That is it. You can rotate the head in the socket very slightly, but it doesn't really matter because it, like, at the distance you'll be looking at this kit from on the shelf, it's not very apparent that it's even looking to the side at all. In terms of your shoulder then, in this part of the torso, it will extend outward to enable a pretty minor shoulder swing, all things considered, which leaves me a little bit worried for the poseability of this kit because this is an entirely melee focused kit. Having good shoulder and torso articulation is kind of key to making a bunch of melee poses look natural, but we'll see in the posing section. The shoulder armor can rotate independently of the arm a little bit to facilitate. Unfortunately, below a 90-degree bend before the arm will want to pop out of the socket in the shoulder joint there, you will get maybe a 60-degree upward raise, maybe a 75-degree, which isn't the greatest. You can, of course, 360 the shoulder about the joint. You get full rotation of the arm in the upper bicep, a single bend in the elbow will give you about a 135-degree bend, and the wrist is going to be on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things. In the torso then, there are 2 polycap ball joints to enable a minor forward ab crunch, and a minor backwards ab crunch. You will get some pretty decent side to side, and of course you can 360 the torso about the peg on the hip. In the waist then, the skirts come together on the runner, but you can't clip them apart for individual articulation. If you clip them apart, each skirt is capable of flipping up almost 180 degrees. The side skirts can raise up about 45 degrees, and the back skirt is fixed in place. There is no hip swing or hip drop mechanism in the legs, so for your kicks, you will get over 90 degrees forward, about 60 degrees to the side before you'll want to pop the side skirts out, and unfortunately you will get next to nothing backwards before the back skirts collide with the leg and get in the way. Also, these cap parts that go in the thigh are very loose. As you can see, that one fell inside of the leg. I will have to fish that out once I'm done filming this segment. A full double bend in the elbow with an armor separation gimmick for the center of the knee here. Unfortunately, the sides of the knees are still hollow like in the base Leo. Will give you a nearly 180-degree bend in the knee. Very impressive given the large dom-like proportions of the legs here. Ankle armor is going to be fixed in place, unlike the base Leo, which is a good thing. The ankle armor on that kit was very loose and floppy. And in the feet then, of course, no heel-toe separation, some hollow spaces on the underside of the feet, unfortunately. For overall toe dips, you will get a minor toe dip, a minor toe raise, and maybe 30 degrees to either side in terms of tilt, and a very minor rotation. So overall articulation is a little bit disappointing in the Leo N, which is very unfortunate considering this is a purely melee-focused mobile suit. So you want that articulation to be good so you can actually convey the weight behind its strikes, but we will see if that articulation is adequate for the very hefty warrior axe in the posing section. So getting the high-grade Leo N into a spin, starting with a, well, running pose, because again, this kit doesn't have any guns, so you can't do a running and gunning pose. Here it is in a very, I guess, goofy kind of pose. I've been watching a few horror movies lately, so I was inspired to do this very goofy running, like, slasher pose here, where it's about to drop the axe down on someone, and this did reveal a couple of issues with posing the Leo N. One, the inability of the leg to kick back, like, any kind of meaningful distance, does mean that many poses will feel very awkward. That relies on having a back foot to emphasize the, I guess, stability of the kit on the ground. Many wide-legged grounded poses that you would want to do to emphasize the heft of its weapons, it just cannot do because of the lack of back leg articulation. In addition, the axe isn't actually fixed in the hand by any way, so while that does mean you can get it in and out of the hands incredibly easily and you have a lot of versatility in where exactly you want to pose the hands along the shaft of the axe, unfortunately that also means the axe is free to slip and roll around in the hands. It was actually pretty difficult to get it kind of balanced and not moving in this kind of pose where it's aligned in the direction of the strike that's about to happen. It kept wanting to flip the axe head down, which was very awkward and was just very annoying to deal with in general, and the lack of ankle articulation does mean that this kit also suffers from an inability to get the feet flat on the ground. Even when you can get the legs in a fairly decent wide pose, the ankles really are not going to cooperate with you. So overall, this kit does suffer from a number of issues, and as you'll see later, it also suffers from the inability to pose it mid-swing. While you can pose it about to swing the axe and just holding the axe in a neutral pose very well, and it looks very intimidating and very impressive in those kinds of poses, in actual dynamic action poses, this kit really does suffer from a lack of articulation in the shoulders, legs, and ankles. So while this might be an interesting thing to pose the kit doing, while having another kit like maybe the Geminas or something doing like a Scooby-Doo run away from it, this isn't really something I would consider having this kit do on the shelf. So of course, to cover all my bases, here is the kit crouched, holding the axe at the ready. So originally this was supposed to be a post-swing pose, where the Leo N is having like the axe head on the ground, having like struck a mobile suit down on the ground and finishing it off. Unfortunately, the kit is unable to do that. The lack of shoulder swing articulation does mean that you can't really align the axe in front of the Leo N very well, meaning that you really do struggle to get post-swing poses when you're swinging the axe vertically, which is where I think the kit is at its most striking. You'll see it in a post-swing pose horizontally later in the conclusion section, but that looks a little bit awkward, especially with the lack of hand option parts you get on this kit. If you want to do a post-swing pose like that, you really want an open expressive hand to show that the kit has let go of the axe with one hand as it's finishing the swing. But in this kind of crouching pose, this kit does look a little bit awkward. Again, you want it to have this kind of intimidating, impressive presence, so you do want it to be expressing all of its impressive size at once, and this kind of crouching pose isn't really conducive to that. While it can crouch very well, and it looks okay while doing so, there isn't really much for it to do while it's crouching because of the poor poseability that I mentioned earlier, and it really lacks many interesting options that you would want to have it do in the first place while crouching, so this isn't really something I would recommend you can do on the shelf with this kit. So getting the kit into the air, here it is recreating the box art pose where it is having like a beam saber clash, or about to have a beam saber clash with the Geminas Unit 1, and this pose is alright and kind of shows what the Leo End is best at, which is looking big and impressive, showing off all of its size, and being in a readying or defensive pose. This kit really does struggle to pull off many action poses very well, so this is about the best that you can get out of this kit's very limited articulation without doing any kind of modification. So this looks alright with the kit, but the short beam saber effects really do look a little bit awkward with how large and bulky this design is. I think if you would swap out the beam saber effect parts for the longer standard style beam saber effect parts from Runner SB13, that would look a lot better with this kit. As it is now, the short style beam effects, while fitting for the Leo, doesn't look particularly good with the Leo N, and I think this design was definitely made with the warrior axe in mind in terms of posing. This kit really doesn't look all that great with the beam sabers, and there isn't really a reason to show it off with it. Again, with the beam sabers, you would want a more nimble, more articulate kit to show off more nimble, elegant, precise strikes with the beam saber, and more like practiced martial arts kind of way of melee fighting, where this kit really just emphasizes brute force and wants to just smash its axe around. So while you can pose it with the beam sabers and it looks alright while doing so, there isn't really a reason to pose it not using the warrior axe with how impressive and synergistic that design is with this mobile suit. So here is the Leo N in a pose from the promo material, about to deliver a gigantic downward axe swing in the air. This is really about the only kind of pre-swing mid-action pose that works for the Leo N, because for the most part, again, like I mentioned earlier, the articulation options are a little bit limited with this kit and prevent you from doing many dynamic mid-swing poses, so this is one of the only things that works, and it looks fantastic. So leave it spinning while I get into the conclusion. So in conclusion, the high-grade Leo N is an interesting, if flawed, variant of the Leo that trades some things out for others, while it adds a significant amount of stability to the kit, replacing many of the problematic polycap ball joints in the Leo with more sturdy PS plastic on plastic joints that do a much better job of holding up the Leo N's much more bulky limbs than the Leo's joints were capable of, even with the thinner proportions of the Leo. It does suffer heavily in terms of versatility and posing, and in, well, posability in general due to limited articulation. The build for this kit is much more involved than the standard Leo, but still falls short of a typical modern high grade. It is competent, but very streamlined and quick. The only thing that really feels very modern high grade-y is going to be the torso there. The rest of the limbs do feel very basic and simple, but despite all of that, it does have a decent amount of part separation and internal frame to make it feel very stable, like I mentioned earlier. In terms of aesthetics, then, this is where this kit really does shine, being very unique and having very bulky, almost gorilla-like proportions. Its legs are a little bit longer than you would want if you wanted proper gorilla proportions, but being a very top-heavy kit with the barrel chest and the very large shoulders does make it look very kind of intimidating and brutish. This kit is also essentially perfectly color accurate once you apply the one color correcting sticker for the bar and the torso. The other color correcting sticker is more of a, I guess, convenience thing to remove the extra step of you needing to paint behind the visor in chrome. They just include a chrome foil sticker, so that's a very nice quality of life thing on their end. But aesthetically, this kit is essentially perfectly color accurate without you needing to do any painting, which is really nice for a modern high grade, especially one that's kind of simple. Normally, with these kinds of very simplistic customized grunt kits, there are a number of small details that would need to be painted, so it's very nice for this kit to defy those expectations and be perfectly color accurate out of the box, albeit this color scheme was very simple, so it's not insanely impressive that this is perfectly color accurate, but it's just very nice in general. In terms of accessories then, this kit is incredibly bare bones, which is very on par for this design. You really only get 2 different weapons for this kit, a pair of beam sabers stored in the shoulders with accompanying short style beam saber effect parts, and the large warrior axe. Unfortunately, the articulation of this kit does let it down in terms of actually posing it with the weapons, so apart from very impressive neutral looking poses or defensive poses, this kit really struggles to make the most out of its arsenal without any modification, which is a little disappointing. But it is fairly complete, and it is in line with your typical Leo that doesn't come with any other hand option parts, so this is kind of a neutral point and kind of a fault of the design in general rather than a fault of the kit adaptation of it. In terms of articulation then, this is where this kit is let down the most, as you might expect from the very bulky proportions. The shoulder articulation, the back leg kick articulation, and the ankle articulation is all very poor, which means that for a melee focused kit like this, you really struggle to get the flexibility you would want in order to convey the kit being mid-swing, to convey the power behind any of its attacks, or even to get it in position to convey that it is attacking in the first place. Without use of an action base, you are incredibly limited in the kinds of poses you can do. Because of the poor ankle articulation, you can't get the feet flat on the ground, which limits how good this kit can look in preparing ground wide-legged poses that would demonstrate the heft of its weapon. So articulation is incredibly poor, and if you're expecting any kind of dynamic posing out of this kit, you're kind of out of luck with this kit. So unfortunately, this is the biggest weakness of this kit and was pretty disappointing for me while working with this kit. A lot of the poses I would want to do with the large axe, you just simply cannot do with this kit. So would I recommend this kit? For $29 with all of the articulation issues present in this kit, it's kind of a hard sell. If you're a big fan of the Wing side story designs, then by all means pick this up. In terms of just a pure visual aesthetic, like replication of the design, it is essentially perfect with no necessary painting out of the box. If you just want a model of the Leo N on your shelf, this does the job perfectly with minimal effort required on your end to make it just look good and accurate. If you want this kit to actually pose it in dioramas or things like that, or have it doing anything dynamic on the shelf, I would skip out on the Leo N, unless you want a full complete set of the Stardust Knights, but by itself, I don't think the Leo N does a good enough job to justify buying it with all of its posing issues. While it is fairly unique in being a large, brutish, melee-focused suit with a gigantic axe, which is pretty cool, unfortunately the inability to actually pose it using that axe in any kind of interesting way really does kind of limit my ability to recommend this kit. So unless you're a huge fan of the Wing side story designs, unless you're a huge fan of this design in general, or if you want a complete set of the side story Leos if you like one of the other designs, this is a kit I would say you can skip out on and not really miss anything. So that was my review of the high grade Leo N. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. If you like reviews like these, make sure to sub and hit the notification bell. If you like this video, give it a like, and I'll see you next time with my review of the Master Grade F80 Gun Raid. I'll see you then.